people of the internet, welcome to the special report, your news and views program about geek gaming culture on the internet. Coming up in the show today, Sony announces the PlayStation Classic, a sort of take on the Nintendo Mini and the Super NES Mini, which is set to include 20 pre-loaded games. We'll talk all about that and why this might be a blessing and a bit of a curse and a bit of a telling of what Sony believes about backwards compatibility for their systems in current. My name is JD Shadow, and the special report will start right about now. On Wednesday, Sony announced that they are coming out with the PlayStation Mini, or PlayStation Classic as it's officially known. On their official SIE.com website, it says, quote, Sony Interactive Entertainment today announced that PlayStation Classic, a miniature games console that mirrors the look of the original PlayStation and comes preloaded with 20 original games, will launch in limited quantities on December 3rd, 2018 in Japan, North America, and Europe. The PlayStation Classic will be available at manufacturer's suggested retail price at 9,980 yen in Japan, 99 USD in North America, and 99 in Europe. The original PlayStation made its debut in Japan on December 3rd, 1994, and with landmark innovations such as enabling real-time 3D CG rendering and adopting CD-ROMs, had a huge impact on the games industry in the 1990s and beyond. The design of the PlayStation Classic resembles PlayStation, including the button layout as well as controllers and outer packaging, but in a miniature size, it is 45% smaller on the sides and 80% smaller in volume than the original console. Preloaded with 20 PlayStation games such as Final Fantasy VII from Square Enix, Jumping Flash from SIE, Bandai Namco's R4 Ridge Racer Type 4 and Tekken 3, and Wild Arms from SIE. PlayStation Classic is a perfect fit for anyone, including the current PlayStation fans, as well as nostalgic fans that enjoyed playing the original PlayStation and gamers new to the PlayStation who want to experience classic PlayStation games from the 1990s. PlayStation Classic includes an HDMI cable for connecting to an external display, such as TV monitors, and, well, this is going to be a bit of a weird thing, a USB cable which needs to be connected to a commercially sold USB AC adapter for power supply from the plug. On select supported titles, users can play with or against their friends with the two controllers included with the console. SIE will continue to further expand its software portfolio across PlayStation platforms, as well as its network services to deliver entertainment experiences that are only possible on PlayStation. I beg to differ about that perspective, but this whole thing begs to have the question asked as to why doesn't Sony just find a way to put backwards compatibility into their systems from the offset? What is it about Sony that right at the moment they seem to want to bring in cash grabs? This in particular seems to be a complete rip-off of the Nintendo Mini and the SNES Mini. Now, granted, Sony's PlayStation lineup in this sense is going to be a little bit more in-depth because, well, some of the games are quite long. Final Fantasy VII is going to be a bit of a longer stretch, and we don't know the other games that are going to be included within this. Wild Arms took a good bit of time, and Final Fantasy VII is a bit of a time sink if you want to put it mildly. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to go out and get this. It's not going to be a whole lot of money. It's going to be $99 in the United States or a regional equivalent. But again, that's $99 that some people will find that they shouldn't really need to pay because they already have systems that will play the original disc, such as the fat PS3s, assuming that people still have them and they're still working, seeing as how some of them are probably on the brink of collapse right about now. Ever since then, it seems as though Sony has said, hey, we can actually make money off of making people want to have backwards compatibility, and we can, instead of actually putting it into the PlayStation 4 and saying that it has something to do with hardware, just keep making these types of deals where you have to pay pay a subscription fee for PlayStation Now or this thing here. And if you can't tell by now, this is not something that I would say would be well worth the wait. Because one thing is for sure, some of the games that are being listed here, you can get on the PlayStation Network if you have a PS3, and I really hope you didn't trade in a PS3 for a PS4, because if you did, then you are a fool for doing that, seeing as how they are trying to continue to do this. Then you already have access to these games on the PlayStation Network. They're what, $5, maybe $10 worth a pop, and once you have them and you download them, they are yours. You can do what you want with them. And keep in mind that this is an expandable library you can get. Now, you had to pay for each game, mind you, but these were games that you might actually want, not those that are preloaded for you. And that's one of the things that I really don't like about these mini systems right now. One of the things that is in the footnotes of this press release says that software titles cannot be added on via download or any other way. Adding on that peripherals for PlayStation such as memory cards cannot be used with PlayStation Classic. Now, to the latter point, I have to think there has to be some way for you to save your progress on games like Final Fantasy VII, because that's a long game. Expecting you to complete that in one sitting is asking you to put away 8 hours of your life if you're speedrunning the game. And let's not even get into if you're playing it casually. Wow, there's gotta be some way for you to save your progress in that game. I have to think that there's going to be some sort of hard drive within the game, or some sort of internal way that you use a virtual memory card inside the system, because if they don't, then that is just foolish. But I wouldn't put it past Sony to do something like that, to be that foolish to do that, seeing as how they're already doing this. I don't put it past them to do something like that, so we'll see how that goes. We'll see what they say about that, and I'll get to that whole thing about how you're supposed to plug this thing in. But one of the things that don't sit right with me is the notion that in these mini consoles, there is no way to expand the library. These preloaded games are it. These 20 games are the only 20 games you'll ever get on this system. Now, granted, some of these are time sinks and you're going to spend a lot of time on them, but once you're finished with these 20 games, and maybe these 20 games have things that you rather not want or rather not have, then what then? You're stuck with them. They're going to give you no other way to get more games onto the system, and that's going to be the same with maybe the Nintendo Mini or the Super NES Mini. What if there comes a time to say, okay, I've completed all the games on this system. What about some other games? What about games that are not on the system that were classics of the time? Where are those games? What about Final Fantasy VIII? What about Final Fantasy IX Tactics? What about Metal Gear Solid? What about those type of games? If they're not on this platform, then you are boned. And I don't get why they don't, at the very least, leave that option open and say, hey, we might add more games going onto the system, and there might be expandable memory for you to add these games onto your system, provided that you have some sort of thumb drive or perhaps a external hard drive that you can plug into the system, provided they gave you the option to do that. Seeing as how the other caveat of this is that they're not going to let you plug in anything else onto the system, that seems kind of weird to me and gives me the notion that this is one of those things where once you've exhausted that entire library of 20 games, then okay, what else is there to do? What else is there for you to be able to do with that system? You basically have a dust collector at that point, unless you want to find some replayability in some of the older games. But that's where a lot of the criticism about that sort of thing comes from, because these are not expandable libraries. I don't understand why people would want things that are not expandable within itself once you exhausted the initial lineup. And that is true with the Nintendo Mini and the Super NES Mini. Yes, they are good things to have for nostalgia, but what if you want to maybe add a game onto that library? What if Nintendo wanted to expand on the library, maybe have you download 20 more games for a lower fee for them or something like that? They could still make money off of that idea while keeping the initial hardware right there. They already have the hardware. They already have the architecture for it. So why not give them the option to expand on the library? Maybe have the Super Nintendo Mini also have a cartridge slot, so where if you still have some of those older cartridges, you can just plug in the cartridge into the system and there you go. Maybe the PlayStation Mini could have that going on, to where you can just plug in one of your older PlayStation discs onto the system and then you can play that. And to be quite honest with you, I would love to see Sony completely improve upon the whole emulation of the PlayStation 3 backwards compatibility on some of the newer models of the PlayStation 3. I still have trouble trying to figure out why Final Fantasy IV on Final Fantasy Chronicles flickers the way that it does. I made a video about that a long time ago and it still to this day is bugged beyond belief. I'm not talking about the newer version of the game, the touch-up of the games, the original Super NES version of the game, the original sprites. That's the game I would love to play again, and I can't do it without emulation because the PlayStation 3 borks the disc of the game on the PlayStation Final Fantasy Chronicles version, which is a tremendous translation of the game. That is a real translation. That is the one I want to play, and unfortunately I can't do it because it flickers to the point where you need an epilepsy warning to be able to play it. That's how borked it is. And they still have not added Final Fantasy IV to the PlayStation Store in that fashion, not the original game. That would be a game I would love to be able to play on my system again, and I can't do it because Sony is not bothered to address that issue or the issue on many of the other games. And instead of just fixing what is broken, they just put out these cash grabs. Now, many people might think that it's not a cash grab, but in my opinion, it seems to be an answer to a problem that they themselves created. They created the problem of no backwards compatibility. They created the problem of keeping their servers closed for things like Fortnite. It just seems as if Sony is getting a swelled head again here, where now that they have a popular console again, now that they are again at the top of the console war, of the console race, they seem to say, okay, now we don't have to listen to the fans. Now we don't have to worry about what they think because they're going to buy our console anyway. Remember what happened with the PlayStation 3? They don't necessarily have to keep supporting you. Now, granted, the PlayStation 3 ended up having a tremendous amount of great games and it had, spec-wise, the most powerful system. But remember, it was a nightmare to code for. It was a nightmare for people to develop for. And they overestimated how many people were willing to follow them regardless of what they tried to do with $699, with the notion of them wanting to have a second job in order to pay for a PlayStation 3. They're not going to do that. What are you thinking? What were they thinking when they went with that? No, they're not going to do that. And then Microsoft came in and swooped everything up. Now, granted, Microsoft did their own stupidity, and it's because of that whole era that we have the words exclusive DLC in our vernacular now. And don't get me started on that whole thing and how that has screwed many people out of content. But PlayStation owners need to be aware that maybe Sony is starting to get a bit of a swelled head again, and maybe they need to be taken down a peg here. If you want backwards compatibility, you gotta speak the hell up. You can't just stay silent. You can't just let it go for a few weeks and forget it ever happened. You got to pester them. You got to not necessarily harass them, but you got to keep their feet to the fire. You got to continue to talk about it. You can't just let the issue die. And I think that's why a lot of things just fall by the wayside like this, where we still see Sony continue on this track to not just put backwards compatibility into the system. If it's a hardware limitation, tell us there's a hardware limitation. Stop being so silent. Why Sony is so silent on these things is bewildering to me. especially when we consider the way you plug this thing in. I have never in my life heard of this way you plug a console in. A USB AC adapter. What do they mean by that? Like a surge protector that might have a USB cable hook up onto it? What do they mean by that? Is there a USB to an AC adapter sort of converter that is available? What exactly are they thinking when they were coming up with this? Are they Apple now? Are they trying to say, hey, we are going to create this whole new thing where, okay, AC adapters are not going to exist. We're going to have USB cables that hook up in some weird and awkward way. Like what Apple tried to do with the whole head jack thing. And people were bewildered by that. And then all of a sudden, they wanted to think that they were creating a standard. No, you're not. You're making things harder for people to just use your product. You're making things a lot harder on yourselves by making people have to go through hoops just to use your product. And they're not going to stay. They're just not going to stay. You're trying to tell people to do the legwork. They don't want to. They just want to use your product. And as much as they would love to use it, and much they love your brand, if you make them jump through hoops, they're going to go to a brand that doesn't make them do that. They want convenience. They don't want to jump through hoops just because they like your brand. Go find another brand. They're not above doing that. They will abandon you. Trust me, Sony. They've already done that and you brought them back. Don't give them a reason to abandon you a second time because they're giving you a second chance. I don't think they're willing to give you a third if you screw this up. Especially when you have Nintendo, who has already came out with their online subscription service, which has the NES library that right now seems like a souped up version of the Nintendo NES Mini. And you know what? That is actually looking to be expandable. There is that word, Expandable Library. One of the things that is going to be paramount going forward with these types of ideas. And of course, you have Microsoft, who is thinking that backwards compatibility is not a four-letter word. That there is a such thing as people who want to play Xbox 360 games on their Xbox One and they don't have to go out and buy a whole new console just to play them. For some reason, Microsoft is becoming what Sony was last gen. They are in second place, or maybe third place, depending on where you put Nintendo at, but they are coming out with things that people might actually want. They might actually want backwards compatibility on the system they already have. They don't want to go out and buy more peripherals or more material in order to just play the game that they should be already able to play. They are adding stuff to things regularly. Sony is becoming cash grabby here. You may not think that I may be in minority, at least for right now, but if this continues, you're going to see a lot of people starting to adopt that mentality if they're not already. We're going to have to wait until we see what Sony chooses to do about the memory card situation, how they're going to work that, and how this USB thing is going to work out, because it may just be what several power strips and surge protectors have now, which is a USB plug or a USB port on the actual strip that will serve as a way to plug something in that sense. But this, I'm not completely excited for it because I completely know why they're doing this, and it is going to be similar to what the flaws of the Super NES and the NES Mini are, which is the library is not expandable and there is no way for you to play the games that you already have lying around on that system. What you get in the box is what you are stuck with, period. And that is something that I believe needs to be addressed with these types of things, and this seems to be like a workaround to a problem that they just don't want to address, that they themselves created because they are just too swelled in the head, or maybe just too lazy to address it, or maybe they don't care to address it because they know people will buy it anyway. Note to PlayStation, note to Sony, you went down that road before. You saw how that happened. You saw what transpired. You saw where that road led. It's it's not necessarily going to end well if you choose to go down that road again. Not saying this is going to be the roadblock that makes people want to abandon your system, but this is one of the symptoms that caused it in the first place. Don't let this happen. That's going to do it for this edition of the special report. Thanks as always for watching. Before I go, I'm going to give you a OC remix track of the day. And since we're on a PlayStation 1 kick, and I want to give you a little taste of a game that I think should be on that whole collection if one were to get it, is a game that is both praised and overlooked. It is Parasite Eve, and this is the main theme from that. Primal Eyes, and the person who is remixing this are Compy Fox and Steve Porden. It is sharing the title of the actual song that was arranged, except it is with the alternate title, Tapeworm. Primal Eyes, Tapeworm. I hope you enjoy it. Please be sure to like and favorite this video. For more geek gaming culture, of course, subscribe, hit the bell. If you like what you see, leave a comment down below about what you thought about the episode and what your thoughts are about the story I covered. And I hope you enjoyed the OC Remix, and give them some support at ocremix.org. My name is JD Shadow, and that just happened.